His legacy stretches beyond Italy's borders, well beyond Europe's borders, you might say. Nothing less than a state funeral for Silvio Berlusconi, Italy's longest-serving post-war leader, who passed away on Monday at age 86. Inside, the high and mighty, packing Milan's Duomo Cathedral. Outside pressed Forza Italia loyalists and fans of AC Milan and Monza, the football clubs he owned. Silvio Berlusconi was the original politically incorrect populist. He pounced on the privatization of Italian television in the 1980s. He brought soaps, sports, and mild titillation to the masses, bored of the old Catholic communist cultural divide in Italy. Long before Donald Trump, he made that jump from media to politics and surfed a wave of transgression that changed Europe for good. Did he outlive his times? Italy's current leader, Giorgia Meloni, who Berlusconi plucked from obscurity when he picked her for his cabinet way back in 2007, now firmly in power thanks to votes that once went to his party. Has the country drifted far right, or were they always birds of the same feather? More broadly, what will politics look like after the man they sometimes call Il Cavaliere? Today in the France 24 debate, how Berlusconi transformed Italy. Joining us from Strasbourg, Sandro Gozzi, member of the European Parliament from the centrist Renew Europe bloc. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting.
From London, Mariana Graffini, Deputy Director of the Centre for Italian Politics at King's College London. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening.
From Cesena, Italy, Maurizio Viroli, Professor Emeritus of Political Theory at Princeton University, the author of Liberty of Servants, Berlusconi's Italy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And thanks as well to Waddick Doyle, Professor of Communications at the American University of Paris, the author of Berlusconi, One Man Brand. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation you have on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24Debate. There's only one president. That's the chant of AC Milan fans outside the Duomo Cathedral. Part of a send-off, you could say, befitting the showman he was. Berlusconi, before becoming a businessman and a politician, starting out as a cruise ship singer. Andrew Hillier has more.
Love him or loathe him, Silvio Berlusconi remained at the forefront of Italian politics for over 2 decades, serving as Prime Minister in 4 governments over 17 years and leaving behind a legacy of controversy.
Ci sono in giro un mare di belle figliuole e di imprenditori solidi e io non sono un santo, lo avete capito tutti.
It wasn't the multiple sex scandals, but an economic crisis and his own legal troubles that ultimately ended Italy's Berlusconi era. Berlusconi was born in 1936 to a middle-class family in Milan. He first made a name for himself as a nightclub singer, but after studying law at university, amassed a large fortune as a property developer. Then, in 1978, Berlusconi turned his ambitions towards the Italian media. He launched a local cable television company and, using his political connections, grew it into Italy's biggest media empire. That, combined with his ownership of football club AC Milan, made him a household name. So Berlusconi set his sights on politics, defining himself as a moderate liberal. In 1993, he formed his party, Forza Italia, which went on to win the 1994 Italian general elections. Despite being a billionaire, he was able to form bonds with ordinary Italian voters. His first government collapsed after 7 months, but Berlusconi was undeterred. He became Prime Minister again in 2001. And though he was voted out in 2006, he won the elections for a 3rd and final time 2 years later. Eventually, though, sex scandals and corruption allegations caught up with Berlusconi. Raunchy so-called bunga-bunga parties at his villa made headlines worldwide and damaged his popularity at home.
Da sempre io conduco una attività ininterrotta di lavoro e se qualche volta mi succede di guardare in faccia una bella ragazza, meglio essere appassionati delle belle ragazze che gay.
In November 2011, Italy's battered economy was the final straw. At the peak of the Eurozone debt crisis, Berlusconi resigned from office. Comeback hopes were dashed in 2013 when he was convicted of tax fraud, ousted from Parliament and barred from running again. That same year, he was found guilty of paying for sex with a minor, a conviction overturned in 2014. Berlusconi had his last foray into Italian politics in late 2022 when his Forza Italia party took part in a coalition, forming Italy's most right-wing government since World War II, led by Giorgia Meloni. And despite decades of highs and lows, Silvio Berlusconi maintained the support of millions of Italians who admired his resilience and macho persona.
Sandro Gozzi, how will you remember Silvio Berlusconi?
Well, as someone who has certainly changed the Italian landscape from the audiovisual point of view, from the political point of view, and also, I would say, from the soccer point of view, even if I'm always been, since I'm active in politics, I'm always been an opponent to Berlusconi, but Berlusconi has changed the political system. Everything was I mean, in 1992, 1993, after the manipulated the judiciary inquiry that broke down an entire political class. Everything was pushing the former Communist Party to take on power in 1994. In a few months, Berlusconi brought up a very, debatable coalition opening to the extreme right, to the post-fascist movement, and he started to organize what we call the bipolar two poles political system in Italy, and that it has been something that has characterized Italy since 1994. Without Berlusconi, that would have never been happened in my analysis. It has imported an American audiovisual model in Italy, and it has got an impact, in my view, a negative impact on let's say the pop culture and the way we influence public opinion through media, through the audiovisual means. But on that, certainly was successful from his perspective, as it was successful on soccer, because brought up to glory Milan after after 30 years. So he was a successful man, but he was a man that I have always opposed as citizens engaged, committed in politics.
Yeah, you mentioned that crucial moment in 1994 when he makes the jump to politics. I want to get back to it, but I also want to pick up on something you just mentioned, Sandro Gozzi. Berlusconi, you could say, won the jackpot when the first national private TV network went his way. This was in the mid-1980s, courtesy of then Prime Minister Benito Craxi. Forget the staid talk shows and documentaries of old. Enter soaps and entertainment like Italio Uno's Drive-In. This episode you're seeing featuring Berlusconi's own son. You get the idea without the sound of the tenure of that show. Maurizio Veroli, this media revolution, arguably as important as his political career that followed?
It sure was, because the media empire that Berlusconi founded and run was a component of the enormous power that he had. Silvio Berlusconi concentrated in his own hands an immense financial power, the power of media. Never anything like that had been seen in Italian history and in the history of liberal democracies. In addition, he owned the party. Forza Italia was a partito personale, a party founded by him, governed by him, loyal to him, not with members and leaders, loyal to ideas or ideology or visions of the future, but they were loyal to him, to Silvio Berlusconi. Now, if you put together these three facts, the enormous financial power, the ownership of a party, a partito personale, And the media empire, you have something that has never been seen in liberal democracies, to say a man with an enormous power. That is what Berlusconi did. That is the change that he introduced. And in my opinion, that power that he had was a corrupting power, was a power that damaged the ethos and the procedures of a healthy liberal democracy.
A corrupting power, but it was again that jump from business to politics, Mariana Graffini, that takes place when the breakdown of the fight against corruption happened, as Sandro Gozzi mentioned, that period 1993, 1994.
Yes, indeed. So Berlusconi was a media tycoon turned into entrepreneur politician. So when he made his electoral breakthrough in 1994, he revolutionized the Italian political system. So after the scandal, the corruption scandal of Mani Pulite, Berlusconi inaugurated the so-called Second Republic. So he introduced a totally different political system, and the label Second Republic actually remarks the difference they break from the First Republic. Berlusconi introduced populism to Italy. He was the first populist leader, and linking with what you just said about the media, I would say that also Berlusconi was the first tele-populist leader, and tele-populism is the kind of populism whereby the leader has a direct connection to the people that is propagated and facilitated also through the media.
Warwick Doyle, he also had a hand here in France. There was, in the mid-1980s, the privatization of the airwaves, and he was one of the major shareholders of a short-lived television station, Channel 5, at the time. And it was a little bit the same flavor when you looked at that programming here in France. It's not the same with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, yes, comes from reality TV before running for president, but it was NBC that owned the television show that he hosted.
Well, Berlusconi also had Tele5 in Germany. He had Tele5 in Spain. He built his empire by the mid-90s. He was moving across Europe, but that collapsed. And he retreated back to having a national television system. And in fact, one could say, no, sorry, I got that wrong. In the 80s, he came with Tele5 in France, Spain, and then as he's borrowing from the Italian state banks, the Banca Nazionale del Lavoro collapsed. He needed to move into the political system. Plus, his political patrons were collapsing.
So hang on, are you saying that he jumped into politics because his business dealings weren't going as well?
Well, there was what my colleagues have referred to as manipoliti, that half of the Italian parliament was arrested under corruption scandals in the scandal of the early 90s. In addition, and so his funds were coming out of banks that belonged to investment funds which belonged to the state. So he needed the assistance of the state to keep funding this expansion, and that collapsed in the early 90s, excuse me. And so before that, he was moving to Germany, Spain, even into Britain for some time. It's interesting that the system didn't work in France, where the model didn't apply. So with the liberalization of media under Mitterrand, we had the development of free radio, we had the famous Radio Libre, we had the competition for that, and he introduced Canal+, Mitterrand, and
so there was
Canal 5. But the 5 failed economically. And it's interesting to think why something that worked in Italy wouldn't work in France. And I can explain that a bit, but it'll take a while.
It would take a long time. Silvio Berlusconi jumps into politics, and I'll put it to you first, Maurizio Viroli. There was, this is the period just after the fall of the Berlin Wall. The old left versus right divide is beginning to collapse. And you have here a politician who's, well, neither siding with the old Christian Democrats or with the remnants of the Communist Party.
Well, it's interesting that one of the slogans or catching words that Berlusconi used since in 1994 was his attack against the communists. He always stressed that Italy was under the threat of becoming a communist party.
And by the way, on that score, Maurizio, outside the cathedral this Wednesday, one of the chants heard by those fans was "Whoever's not jumping is a communist." What's your reaction to that?
The problem is that by the time Berlusconi entered in politics, there was no Communist Party left. The Communist Party was decided to change itself in 1991 to become the Democratic Party of the Left, the PDS. Now, moreover, when the Communist Party still was a Communist Party, everyone in the world, the serious political analysts, recognized that the Italian Communist Party was fully constitutional, fully loyal to democracy. So Berlusconi was simply using anti-communism for purposes that were completely unfounded. It was a lie. It was a sheer lie. I understand. It worked. It worked. It was an important part of his political success. But I think that the real source of his power was not populism. I'm an old professor. I use classic terms. He was a demagogue. And the force of demagogues is exactly to sustain, to increase the fears of the demons and to encourage their worst passions. So Berlusconi, yes, was an anti-communist, but there was no communist to fight against with.
Mario Graffini, in 2023, that there's still people chanting against communists outside that cathedral in Milan. What's your thoughts on that?
So, yes, I agree with my colleague. I think it's quite anachronistic in the sense that there's no major communist party in Italy now. But I think that chanting against communists really tells us a lot about Berlusconi's legacy, that is, as we say, larger than life, right? Because his appeal extended throughout different generations. So he started out as an anti-communist politician, and also upon his death, people are still chanting against the communists. So I think that this is a perfect testament to his own extended appeal, both geographically and chronologically.
The argument, we talked about the communists, let's now perhaps talk about the Catholics. The argument's still raging over whether or not a state funeral was appropriate, both over the various cases against Berlusconi and also because of his private life. And it was certainly a tightrope act for the Archbishop of Milan, what with his 33-year-old partner in the front row, to one of his ex-wives, one row behind her.
In this moment of farewell and prayer, what can we say about Silvio Berlusconi? He was a man, a desire for life, a desire for love, for joy. And now we celebrate the mystery of fulfillment.
Sandro Gozzi, again, when Silvio Berlusconi becomes a household name, there's still that left versus right divide in Italy, and the right is associated with the Catholic Church. Your thoughts when you were listening just there to the Archbishop?
No, I'm not sure. I wouldn't take this perspective, honestly, concerning Berlusconi. Berlusconi was very effective in mixing up traditional politics and traditional parties, which is with a strong, innovative political message and communication. Because on one side, he managed to put together what was left of what we call the Fourth Republic, that political class which was basically totally dismantled by the clean hands affair Mani Pulite. So he brought together former Christian Democrats linked to the Catholic world, former socialist, and he opened to the extreme right. We wouldn't got today Giorgia Meloni, President of the Council in Italy, if at that time Berlusconi did not open to the extreme right, to the post-fascist Italian socialist movement. On the other hand, Berlusconi presented himself as a very new man in political terms. His slogan was a liberal revolution in 1994. And I have to say that it was very attractive, the slogan liberal revolution, in a country which is not liberal at all. And which has been always based on a sort of compromise between the Christian Democrat, the Catholic world, and the communist world, because this is what the reality in Italy, not only at national level in some part of the country, but also at local and regional level. Everything was organized mainly, not everything, but mainly on a compromise between Christian Democrats and communists. This strong liberal revolution message, Berlusconi used it to win the election. He did not implement it, with some exception of taxation. Then I wouldn't say, I mean, the Catholic world, a part of the traditional right-wing Catholic world was behind Berlusconi. Let's say the most progressive Catholic world organized immediately in opposition to Berlusconi, and Romano Prodi, which is a Catholic Christian Democrat, was the one who beat Berlusconi in 1996. And I mean, if there is someone who is clearly a Catholic committed in politics, in Italy is Romano Prodi. So I would say that, yes, it was ambiguous with the Catholic world, but the Catholic world, since the end of the First Republic, since the Clean Hands affair, was divided into two parts. A part with the right wing led by Berlusconi, a part building up alliances with the former communists, with the Democratic Party of the left, that alliance that turned into the Olive Tree Coalition, and then the Democratic Party, which still exists in Italy today.
Warwick Doyle, was he kind of all things to all people in that spectrum from the center to the far right, or did he have his own?
Berlusconi won a prize on advertising in 1964 when he was a student in law from the Marconi Advertising Agency. And since then, his whole strategy was based about branding and advertising. He once said the purpose of commercial television is to increase the sales of advertised goods. He said that in France. If you can imagine that idea, in the end, he became the product. He sold himself. And he did it by transferring meaning from one world to another. He transferred the idea of being a winner in soccer to politics. He transferred the idea of being a winner in television to creating a network of shopping malls, which then collapsed later. It didn't work. But he kept moving from one sphere to another, moving meaning from one sphere to another, whether it be football, religion. He constructed his political party out of a series of soccer clubs. He didn't construct it as a party. He constructed a set of clubs around, and he chose his candidates out of people who sold advertising for his TV station. It's all veneer, it's all show, it's all branding, and it worked. And therefore, he changed the world in some ways, because Boris Johnson, Donald Trump would all follow that logic. It's not just a logic of populism, it's a logic of television. And the other thing he did was counter-program. He always, whatever the opposition said, he would say the opposite. There was no content or ideology. It was constantly positioning himself to attract audience, in a sense.
And that is a lasting legacy, you're saying. Maurizio Viroli, you agree?
No, I agree that Berlusconi has profoundly changed the Italian scenario, the Italian political scenario. But I would like to insist on the fact that he doesn't have a political legacy to transmit, to give to future generations, because, for instance, he was not a liberal at all. Yes, it's true. He spoke of a liberal revolution, but between Berlusconi and liberalism is a huge difference. I've been teaching political philosophy now for almost 40 years in the United States, and if there is one thing that liberal thinkers have been always standing for, is the idea that any power, any sovereign power must be limited. And Berlusconi had an almost unlimited power. And second, all political liberal theorists insisted that on the rule of law. Now Berlusconi passed laws that were designed to sustain his own personal interest and tried everything to avoid the rule of law. And third, this idea that Azienda Italia, that Italy is a company, is from a liberal point of view simply a monstrosity, because the Republic is not a company. A company belongs to someone. A republic belongs to nobody.
Thus, the question we've been asking, what's to become of Berlusconi's Forza Italia party? It's got several factions, as spelled out there by Waddick Doyle, including one run by his last companion, 33-year-old Marta Fascina. There you see her in his company. Last year, she was elected to parliament from a district in Sicily. Mariana Graffini, when you looked at the lineup of people in the front row there at the service earlier, what are your thoughts? Is Forza Italia a dying party, or is it already one that has... did Berlusconi outlive his moment in politics?
Yes, so I think that Forza Italia has been seeing a decline. At least this is very visible in the results of the last election, so in 2022. However, I do not think that the party is going to implode. So this is a serious risk, but I do not think that the party is going to implode. Indeed, there are various factions that may be mirrored also in the distribution of the attendees to his state funeral in the first row. We have on one side Marta Fascina, so his companion and pseudo-wife. She's very young, and she has been assembling around her a youth wing of Forza Italia. So she has been picking very loyal and young Forza Italia representatives that can carry on with Silvio Berlusconi's legacy. On the other hand, we see the contrast, probably an intergenerational contrast between Marta Fascina, so the youth, and the more established and institutionalized wing represented, for instance, by Tajani. Tajani is Italy's foreign minister. He has been Berlusconi's loyal companion throughout all these decades. And Tajani is a very institutional person. So he has been in the European Parliament, he has been in the Italian Parliament and in the Italian government, and he represents a senior male leader vis-a-vis the younger leaders that may be represented by Marta Fascina's disciples.
And if you're a betting woman, would you say that this party is going to rebound? Because it's gone from, 34% to 8% at the last election.
Yes, I think that, so the party, I don't think that's going to rebound, to really climb up again to the glorious times that it enjoyed in the past. I don't think anyway that's going to wither away at the same time. It may stay at around that percentage of votes, around 8-10% of votes. But here they are facing a very serious challenge, because they can maintain the same number of votes or a similar number of votes only if they manage to put up a strong and solid core, and that is going to follow loyally the leader. And Silvio Berlusconi was characterized by his charismatic leadership. At the moment, it is very hard to foresee who's going actually to fill Silvio's shoes, who's going to be as charismatic as Silvio. So we have a young woman, Marta Fascina, and we have an established male senior man, Tajani. So neither of them seems to be particularly charismatic. So this is the real challenge. Only if they manage to pick a very charismatic leader and loyal representatives gathering around this charismatic leader, they may continue with a similar percentage of votes. Otherwise, it's very likely that the party is going to decline even further in its electoral results.
Sandro Gozzi, you heard earlier in this conversation Maurizio Viroli describing how Forza Italia is a party built around one man. So isn't this the end?
It is the end. Forza Italia today is like those stars which are dead, but we still see some light on planet Earth. All these people, Tajani, Fascina, etc., existed only because Berlusconi existed. Most of them, they do not have any political clout, any territorial routings. And a party which has been conceived around a charismatic leader, this charismatic leader, Berlusconi, has carefully avoided to prepare a successor, to prepare a succession, because there could not be a succession after Berlusconi. I mean, this party, in my view, is dead. Of course, it's not dead immediately, because Giorgia Meloni needed the support of Berlusconi and Forza Italia to win the election, so she gave to Forza Italia much more seats compared to the real percentage of the vote that Forza Italia got and Forza Italia had in the opinion poll. So you got a presence, a significant presence of Forza Italia in the parliament. You got a significant presence of Forza Italia in the regional parliaments, at municipal level. So it is clear that it is like a star. Huh? I mean, the light won't go away in a short time, but I mean, in my view, Forza Italia does not have any future.
So let me ask you on this.
There is a part of the electorate.
Let me ask you on this, Sandro Gozzi.
Yeah, please.
At the last election, Berlusconi's voters, according to the surveys, migrated towards Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party. And it was a sympathetic crowd when she pulled up to arrive at the funeral. She's the one who told the nation on Monday that it would be state honors for this funeral. Has she effectively taken over his turf?
Not completely. Giorgia Meloni has a totally different profile from Silvio Berlusconi. Giorgia Meloni is a pure product of Italian politics. She has done only politics since she was 16 years old, and she's very shrewd in the political landscape, and she's already attracted a substantial part of the votes which were for Italia, and she will continue to do so. There is a part of the electorate, in my analysis, that will be absorbed by Forza Italia. There is a part of the electorate that could be absorbed by a new central force. The problem today is that the central parties are fragmented. They are struggling to build up an alliance. But, for example, in view of the next European elections, which will be the first major political test for the government and for the opposition, if you had a common list among the different liberal and centrist parties, that common list for the European election could also attract part of the voters of Forza Italia. So, I mean, there will be a competition between Giorgia Meloni on one side and people like the former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi and others to try to occupy the space at the center-right, which has been left by Berlusconi's departure. I'm very convinced that it is a dynamic which was already going on in the recent months, because, I mean, after all, it was a possibility that Berlusconi could have a serious problem with health. We knew it, and it's the dynamic that is going to accelerate very much, and on which will depend, in my view, certainly a part of the results in the next European elections.
Maurizio Viroli, when you see how Meloni has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine, Silvio Berlusconi, who got a very sympathetic message from Vladimir Putin after his passing. Has Meloni, we talked to borrow Waddick Doyle's term, branding, is she going to review her own brand now that Berlusconi has passed?
I don't think she will change much of her language and of her ideology simply because she's winning. And I think that many supporters of Berlusconi will become supporters of Giorgia Meloni simply because she is a winner. The supporters of Berlusconi, they loved Berlusconi because they were fascinated by his power. Now, the powerful person is Giorgia Meloni. He is very predictable. I might be wrong, but it's typical of populist voters, of people who love populist leaders to stay with those who are winning. And therefore, I think that the greatest chunk of the voters and the leadership of Berlusconi will migrate under the flags of Giorgia Meloni or of Salvini. Let me just add a detail. There is a serious problem with the legacy of Silvio Berlusconi. As my colleagues have remarked, Silvio Berlusconi was a charismatic leader, but the problem with charismatic leaders is that the charisma dies with the leader. It is not something you can give to somebody else. And I want also to emphasize that the Partito, the Forza Italia, is a personal party. Therefore, without the person of Berlusconi, this party, again, I may be wrong, it is always difficult to make predictions in politics, but I am prepared to bet a substantial sum of money or my reputation that without Berlusconi, Forza Italia will disappear.
Warwick Doyle, has Italy changed radically in the last 3-4 years? Or are we seeing just simply political families redefining themselves?
Italy has changed radically in the last 20 years, and Berlusconi is the person who changed it, who took away a system based around the state to a system based around brands. Berlusconi's key activity was changing habits. When he developed a television network, he didn't try to attract audience, he tried to break the habits of the state network. He always broke other people's habits. Then he tried to break political habits and change people's political allegiance. He constantly moved, changing people's habits, assembling audiences and moving them one frame to another. Without him, in my opinion, the party's dead. But he's changed the values of Italy, he's changed the way it works, each time by this process of transforming how people behave, in a sense, or how they think. Meloni has understood that logic and is a key disruptor, breaking down, coming out of the fascist party, and her issue has been largely to redefine politics around issues of personal life. She pushes a lot the anti-LGBTQ framework, representing the family, even though herself is not really an idealized Catholic woman, but she proposes that sort of idea. So it's a model of society. But she is doing what Berlusconi did. She disrupts. And that's the history of the last 20 years of Italy.
And you're saying he was successful at this. France's president fancies himself as a disruptor, breaking the traditional left versus right mold in, again, a country that's similar in that it's very statist. But has he changed France the way that Silvio Berlusconi's changed Italy?
Because you have a very strong state in France from Louis XIV, well before Louis XIV. In Italy, the state dates from 1870, and Italy has a process called trasformismo, where people move from one political family to another. They've been doing it since the beginning of the Kingdom of Italy. So people shift parties all the time and have moved parties, and parties, if you look at the history of how it moves. And so Berlusconi became the master of doing that, of shifting alliances. And the left has sort of surrendered in a way and no longer presents a very strong political ideology. That's a long story that I can't explain here. So there's a sort of vacuum, and Meloni has done that very successfully. Meloni does that through all sorts of ways. I mean, she's a Lord of the Rings advocate. She disrupts politics by this imagine of heroism coming out of fantasy literature. She's a model. She completely disrupted, apart from being a woman. Yeah.
Mariana Graffini, you agree then Silvio Berlusconi, from a different political family from that of Giorgia Meloni, but she has followed his playbook when it comes to making it about the person.
Yes, I do think so. I agree with this. So Giorgia Meloni is herself a very charismatic leader. She projected herself as the underdog arising from the Roman periphery, and she portrayed herself as a self-made woman. She entered politics very young. She really climbed up the ladder of political career and political success, and at the same time she presents herself as a woman of the people. So she has been creating a quite personal party. She has been the founder of Brothers of Italy. She has been at the helm of Brothers of Italy, and she has a strong personal presence within the party, even overshadowing the presence, for instance, of Ignazio La Russa, that's another founder of Brothers of Italy, and he's a senior male figure in the Italian political system.
So you mentioned earlier, Mariana, about how there was this kind of Second Republic vibe with Silvio Berlusconi. Does she augur a Third Republic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've been thinking about it for a while. She may do so, also because she's the first female prime minister that Italy has witnessed, and also she is the leader of the first totally populist radical right government in Italy. So this may signal the beginning of a new era for Italian politics. However, it is too early to be seen, to be assessed.
There was a huge outpouring of sympathy again on that piazza in Milan this Wednesday. Inside the Duomo Cathedral, few foreign dignitaries. The Emir of Qatar and Hungary's populist Prime Minister Viktor Orban among the only big names making the trip. Brussels, represented by Italy's highest representative there, the economy commissioner, Paolo Gentiloni, himself a former prime minister, the Italian flag at half-mast in Brussels, and I presume in Strasbourg, Sandro Gozzi. Should more EU leaders have made that trip to Milan?
Well, Berlusconi did not have a very good reputation around Europe, especially since 2011, when Italy was in the midst of the financial crisis, and the risk wasn't only for Italy, the risk was for the Eurozone as a whole, and probably for the European Union itself. Berlusconi had been perceived by other leaders as not effective, not able to take the reign of the country and to bring the country through and out of this very difficult financial crisis. I think that beyond the issue of ethics, the issue of young girls, etc., this was the political end of Berlusconi on the European landscape. I say that probably is the first reason. The second reason, but it is my opinion, so take it with a pinch of salt, of course, is that the very strong political and personal alliance with Vladimir Putin is not really did not make Berlusconi particularly popular in this period, especially since the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. It was really a bromance between Vladimir and Silvio, and also during and after the aggression, during the wars, since few weeks ago, Berlusconi strongly supported Vladimir Putin. He justified the invasion of Ukraine. He said that after all, Putin wanted to replace Vladimir Zelensky with good people, and that in few days they would have brought peace in the country. He was also openly critical of Vladimir Zelensky. In my view, this played a lot on the fact that also today in Piazza Duomo, in the Cathedral of Milan, there were not many international leaders. That doesn't mean that before 2011, Berlusconi did not have good relationship with global leaders. He had a good relation with George Bush. He had good relation with Tony Blair. He had, a good relation with other leaders. I have to say, and again, I'm an opponent of Forza Italia and Berlusconi, but Berlusconi delivered a very well-received speech before the US Congress. And it was one of these few leaders who had the honor to address the US Congress. All this happened before 2011. So in my view, there is a little bit of watershed. First, 2011, end of the political career of Berlusconi. He will never be prime minister again, and then he will also be sentenced to jail with a suspension later. And that's the first watershed, which isolated himself from the international mainstream. And the second one is certainly his support, against the odds, against everything, against every evidence that he wanted to assure to his friend Vladimir Putin until 2 days ago.
And certainly what is for sure is that, as the panel was saying, he's a man who transformed politics in Italy and well beyond. Sandro Gotti, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Strasbourg. I want to thank Maurizio Viroli in Cesena, Mariana Graffini in London, Waddock Doyle. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.